All right. So this is my presentation for Canvas Day One's discussion on taking back the schools. So what were the demands of the students? The students made four demands. One was bilingual instructions, and two were the hiring of more Mexican American teachers. And those two kind of go hand in hand. A lot of the Anglo American teachers wouldn't be able to teach classes in a bilingual sense as well as a Mexican American teacher would, but it's also about giving opportunity to Mexican Americans in a new job market. The third demand was that Mexican American history courses be taught. And even now, and at least in the public school setting, there is no Mexican American history being taught for an exception of maybe a little bit of a brush over on the Alamo. And then the fourth was the end to corporal punishment. This one was the most surprising to me, but it makes sense. We probably heard the stories of if someone spoke Spanish, they would be punished. But that's kind of all that was really said, unless you had like a tia or a tío that would say, "Oh, when I spoke Spanish, they would wash out my mouth with soap." And it makes sense why they would want an end to corporal punishment, especially since it was used against them. So, what was the first attempt students made for equal opportunity to meet these demands? Students first attempted to meet with the school board. A handful of them organized themselves with these demands, and they met with the school board. They were met with unconcerned responses and claims that there weren't enough resources to meet their demands. And that was a slap to the face. This is inevitably what resulted in the walkouts because the students felt like their needs and their demands were not being concerned about. There was no concern about them. And this, the first form of, or the first protest, which were the walkouts, did have success. They did have success in that the school board promised them that they were going to meet some of their demands, but that was short lived. Shortly thereafter, some of the organizers of the protest were immediately arrested, and the students realized that their demands and their the promises weren't going to be upheld. So the students then conducted sit-ins as opposed to the walkouts. The sit-ins lasted a couple days. Some of the students were arrested because they refused to leave, and they did this as a direct result to, or as a direct protest to the indictments of those teachers that were arrested. They were known as the LA 13. And kind of leading into the article, how did Chicanas protests differ from their male counterparts? Well, Chicanas weren't allowed or expected to be at the forefront of the protest. In the film, we see that a lot of the males, at least in the interviews that were being conducted, it was mainly their male counterparts that were doing the getting the media attention. Um, However, in the article, we see that they tended to organize the walkouts. It was the parents, it was the mothers, it was the females who organized the walkouts. And once it was organized, then the males would come in and kind of steal the show. They would take credit and they would take over the situation. And they would also make the Chicanas a strategic persons to make the protest seem less threatening. One of the quotes in the article is, "So we knew if we needed someone who didn't look threatening, I was to go." And that's one of the female students who is acknowledging that they had a specific role in the protest, and that was to make the protest as a whole seem less threatening, more digestible for the general public. We see it in the film, the brown berets and a paramilitary group. It was the media was trying their best to make the protest seem as threatening as possible, and the Chicanas were kind of a way to avoid that. However, it ended up putting them in the back burner of the protests and not at the forefront like they deserved. And here are my references. Thank you.